Welcome into today's episode of Renner Ranks. I'm obviously your host, Mike Renner. Today we're talking top 5 takeaways from week 6 of the NFL season, the All-22 takeaways. And my top takeaway, there's a defense out there right now that, in my opinion, is the best we've seen since the Legion of Boom.
This is Renner Ranks, the ultimate NFL ranking show. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
That's right. Renner Ranks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Very special shout out to the everydayers out there tuning in every day to watch and listen to this show. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. As I said, top 5 takeaways. Let's get right into it. At number 5, Jared Goff and this Detroit Lions team. I don't know who this Jared Goff is, but this is the best I've seen him look in his NFL career, dating back to the times when he was, an MVP candidate for the Los Angeles Rams. And it's because the bad Jared Goff, the one that you could coax him into turnovers over the middle of the field, the guy that Bill Belichick got in his head in the Super Bowl and then ruined him for the next year and a half. That guy's basically gone. Yeah, there were so many opportunities on tape this past week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers where things could have gone poorly. They were getting pressure on them. They had some blitzes that got home. And again, Goff prevented making that game-changing, boneheaded play that would have cost them the game. He was as cool and calm under pressure and has been all season long as I've ever seen him in his NFL career. PFF has him charted with only 3 turnover-worthy plays. I didn't see any turnover-worthy plays this past week against the Bucs. And I thought, again, the Bucs had a good game plan. There were a lot of plays that were going nowhere, were going to get shut down. One of the very first that jumped off the film to me was a blitz where they had a free runner off a play-action pass. And it's a play where Goff in the pass, staring down a guy, could have taken a bad sack, could have thrown it up for grabs down the football field. And all he did, dump it right at the feet of his running back. Got the ball away. It wasn't an easy play. His eyes weren't at the running back. He knew where he was. Got his eyes to him and just dumped it, and then didn't take a negative play that, again, the Jared Goff of old, the Jared Goff when he was in his lean years with the Los Angeles Rams before they traded him, and even really early on in his career with the Detroit Lions, he would have tried to create something, tried to do a little too much, and I think that's the biggest thing is he's not trying to do too much in this offense. He's facilitating. He's going above and beyond when it's the call, when it's there, when the play needs to be made, but then he's not making those boneheaded plays. And if that's the case, if this is the guy we see all season, I think the Lions can compete in the NFC. I think at minimum, this Lions team is going to win the NFC North. I mean, they may have this division locked up more so than any other team has the division locked up in the NFL right now. They're sitting there at 5-1 atop the North. Packers are in second place at 2-3. And as a Packers fan, I can tell you this is an average Packers team. This is a Packers team that is not built to go on a big run in the second half of the season and climb and meet this Detroit Lions team. So they still haven't really been tested and faced, a cream of the crop to see how they're going to stack up this season. But I think we get a chance to see that this upcoming weekend against the Baltimore Ravens, going to Baltimore. I think that is a game that's going to be a great litmus test for just how far this team's come. Because, right, they're going to make the playoffs this year. I think we all feel pretty confident in that. This defensive turnaround looks massive. But are they a nice story who really isn't going to make noise come playoff time? Or can they compete with the Philadelphia Eagles of the world? Can they compete with the San Francisco 49ers of the world? Because the top of the NFC right now, as much as people clown the conference overall and how maybe they don't have near the depth that the AFC does, the top of the NFC is still pretty damn good. I mean, the San Francisco 49ers and the Philadelphia Eagles were your last 2 unbeaten teams. Obviously, they fell over the weekend, but those are 2 very complete football teams and may very well be the best 2 teams in the NFL as it stands right now. So can they compete with them? We'll get a test this weekend. But again, going back to Jared Goff here, I think there's a case to be made that we've seen legitimate development from him. PFF has his passing grade under pressure as the highest of his career. Again, the turnovers that he's avoiding, I think you kind of have to put him in that. I think going into this season, a lot of people would have considered him an average NFL quarterback, somewhere in the 15-16 range, if you're really ranking him up. But I think you have to put him closer to that Dak, Kirk Cousins, Geno Smith in that tier, if not above some of these guys, the way he's playing this year. And we'll get to his offensive coordinator and some of the surrounding weapons in a second here a little later on as one of my other takeaways. But I do think that this offense, the way he is operating it, it's going to be tough to stop. The additions of Sam Laporta and now Jameson Williams coming back really add a different layer and element to this offense, because Laporta can get down the field, man. That guy, I mean, this tight end class is living up to the hype, this rookie tight end class. And him especially, he looks like an upgrade over Hawkinson, truly, in terms of how they want to utilize a tight end in that offense and what he can do athletically. He just has so much more of a vertical element than Hawkinson ever brought to the table for that team. And then Jameson Williams, my Lord, that speed. You saw it even when he wasn't targeted. He obviously has the big play touchdown where it was like a window that I could have hit. That was not Goff's best throw of the day, and it still goes for a touchdown, that corner route. But he was drawing safeties to him pretty much anytime he got free release going down the football field. You just had to account for it. And that's something that they really haven't had when he's been sidelined. And now him and Laporta, two guys that can really get down the football field to just make those bigger windows to Amon-Ra St. Brown. Because Amon-Ra St. Brown, for as good as he is as a slot wide receiver, has never been a pure get down the football field vertical threat. He's nasty underneath. He's nasty at the intermediate level, but that's kind of his bread and butter. And so to get bigger windows at those areas of the football field, you need guys who can stretch the safeties, who can keep their eyes deeper and not let them come downhill and not let these guys really just key and come downhill on a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown. But yes, this Lions team, like I said, my fifth biggest takeaway, whatever Jared Goff's doing right now is about to get him paid. He's got one more year left on his contract, just over $30 million he's due for in 2024. Would not surprise me if sometime this offseason, if he continues to play the way he has, he's in line for a big extension. All right, my fourth biggest takeaway of week 6 of the NFL season from watching the All-22, and this one's kicking it back to Thursday night, where the Kansas City Chiefs held off the Denver Broncos in a 19-8 win on the backs of their defense. This is a team that the Chiefs are the AFC favorite, and it's not just because of Patrick Mahomes. This is a team that legitimately has a defense that can show up every single week and slow down teams enough. If this team had 2018 Patrick Mahomes offense, and this team had 2018, 2019, we're talking about maybe one of the best teams of all time, because this is a different animal, what they're sending out there now defensively. And it's because this is one of the best secondaries in the NFL. There's a few different things at play here that I want to talk about with the Chiefs defense. But first and foremost, I want to talk about the secondary and the way Steve Spagnuolo deploys this secondary. Because hats off Steve Spagnuolo. He is, if you're ranking up defense coordinators right now, which at some point we will, this is Renner Ranks. We rank something every single day. And at some point, we're going to rank the defense coordinators in the NFL. He's top 3. Steve Spagnuolo, I love the way he puts together this defense in a world full of everyone talking about the stupid Fangio scheme, which I'm really sick of hearing about at this point, because you hear it brought up every week. But those are teams playing off coverage, deeper with their secondary, kind of devaluing almost their corner and safety positions because they're not asked to do as much. They're not asked to get involved as much. They're almost glorified like tacklers at that point in what they're asked to do. They're not pure cover players. In a world full of that, they're kind of zigging. And it's been like this the whole Steve Spagnuolo era, but they play press man. They'll punch you in the mouth. They're asked their corners to have difficult assignments. They ask them to not only play press, but also come up and fill a lot in the run game, blitz a lot in the run game. They blitz their corners or safeties at the third most often of anyone in the NFL. The only two that blitz more are the Patriots and the Vikings. Belichick tree, obviously with Brian Flores there in Minnesota. This is the third most. The Chiefs have blitzed their corners / safeties the third most after those two teams. And it's just a more fun brand of football to watch. The Fangio brand of defense objectively stinks to watch comparatively. No one wants to watch dink and dunks down the football field, hold them to a field goal. That stinks objectively. It's not nearly as fun as what the Chiefs are doing defensively, because not only do they do that, so that's the first thing. This corners and safeties on the outside, they're playing press, they're getting in. And truthfully, this is one of the best, like I said, secondaries in the NFL. I think Trent McDuffie has already solidified himself as a bona fide stud, the second-year corner, their first rounder from 2022. He is, at minimum, the best cover slot in the NFL. He is unbelievable in terms of playing press with the two-way go. He got after Justin Jefferson. He's gotten after a lot of guys over the course of his career. His versatility and what he can do has really opened up some doors on the secondary. But then L'Jarius Sneed also on the outside, maybe one of the most underrated players in the entire NFL because he's so good at the line of scrimmage, disrupts releases so often, and is just a physical presence there on the outside. Now on the back end, I think Brian Cook's had a great second-year breakout as well. I think he's just a very solid guy to have there on the back end. So they go deep in terms of guys who are just good, like even Joshua Williams as a third corner, Jalen Watson. Those guys aren't liabilities. So it's a very deep, very talented secondary. But then I love what they do with the defensive line as well. They are a defensive line that kind of goes with jumbo personnel. They don't like undersized guys out there off the edge. They like 260-plus DNs that are going to bull rush. And so you get, you have the one Chris Jones. You got the real deal difference maker on the interior. But then you have three other guys just collapsing pockets. Like they don't high side rush on the outside. They're not speed rushing. All they're doing is everyone's trying to walk their man back to get that pocket as tight as possible every single play. And kind of an underrated part of that is they bat down a ton of freaking passes, this defensive line. They had a couple more, I believe, this past week. Since the start of the 2022 NFL season, they have 40 batted passes as a defensive line. No other defense in the NFL has more than 28. They have 12 more than anyone else. They lead the NFL again this year with 11 batted passes because, again, when you have four guys who are rushing with always their eyes on the quarterback, you are impacting passing lanes. And so you're playing this. It's a very cohesive brand of football they play with their defensive line and their secondary, in that you're going to have these tight pockets with these tight windows that, because it's so crowded in there and these guys are getting their hands up, and as a quarterback, that's living in the back of your head, how tight it is and how much that you're visually impaired trying to see down the football field. And then they're playing a ton of press on the outside, and it's just slowing down how quickly guys can get out into their routes. And so you're always just kind of uncomfortable when you're playing this Kansas City Chiefs defense. There may be guys open, but you're never feeling really comfortable about getting it to them. And they're second right now in the NFL in points per game against, 14.7 points per game. They're not winning because of this offense. It's a far cry from, again, that 2018, 2019 offense isn't walked through that door. Obviously, Pat Mahomes is carrying what is a somewhat lackluster group of offensive skill position players outside of Travis Kelce. They're still good offensively, but this is a team that's for probably the first time, or the most at least, that I've seen in the career of Patrick Mahomes, they're winning with their defense, and that should scare everyone, because I think at some point they'll figure it out offensively. At some point they'll get this personnel to play above kind of their talent level, which they have always have. They've always been able to do that. They got Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. That's why they have 2 Super Bowls and go to the AFC Championship game every year. But my Lord, this is the best defense of the Patrick Mahomes era, and that should scare a lot of the other teams in the AFC. All right, we're going to get to number 3 after this. But first, like I said at the top, this podcast is brought to you by the Gametime app. I was at the Notre Dame game this past weekend. Thankfully, my brother gave me those tickets. Shout out to Andy. But I know Evan Silva, established the run, fantasy god. He went to the Notre Dame game, got some last-minute tickets. I told him to come through, told him it was going to be a great time. It ended up being a great time. Using the Gametime app, though, you can get last-minute tickets to any game that you want without a hassle. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total upfront, so you know you're getting a great deal without hidden fees. I know that's the worst when it says it's $150, and all of a sudden you go to the final price and it's $250. Where those hidden fees come from, I don't know, but in Gametime app, you won't have those. You can buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. That's all it takes. Takes the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime app. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. This podcast is also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest independently owned DFS platform in North America. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is the most fun I've had. You can win up to 25 times your money this football season just picking more or less. You have to select at least 2 players, pick more or less on the projected stats, place your entry, and then watch the money roll in. It really is that easy. Also, PrizePicks takes Apple Pay, takes the worry of whether or not you're going to get your money out of it in the experience. I know I've had a great time using it. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL, LOCKEDON NFL for a first-time deposit match of up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, my number 3 all-22 takeaway comes from that Eagles loss to the New York Jets, one of the biggest upsets of the weekend. And it's the fact that this Eagles team is a completely different team without Lane Johnson. Lane Johnson obviously goes down in this game, I believe 9 snaps in with a high ankle sprain. Timetable for that obviously depends on the severity of that. We'll find out here in the coming days, but he very well may be. I mean, it's between him and Trent Williams for the most valuable offensive lineman in the NFL. Because Trent Williams, what he does in the running game is unique. He's the best run blocking offensive tackle in the league right now. And obviously with what the 49ers do in the run game, he is massive to it. Like the backside cutoffs that he can make, the pulls that we've seen him do, like he is special in that regard. But Lane Johnson is the best pass protecting tackle in the league right now. Well, not right now technically because he has a high ankle sprain. But prior to that high ankle sprain, the man was the best pass protecting right tackle in the NFL. To put some context to just how insane he has been. And if you watch the Eagles offense, like they don't dress up passing plays. They just, what makes that offense so special is the fact that they know that going to every single game, you are not going to get the better of their offensive line. So they scheme up the way they play offense a little bit differently in that they're not having to feign chips on the outside. They don't have to use motion to slow down guys. They don't need to use a ton of play action to give Jalen Hurts time to throw. So they can get 5 out in routes, give Jalen Hurts a ton of options on a ton of plays just because that offensive line is so good and so trusted. And Lane Johnson, obviously a big part of that to put some context to how just insane he's been. So hasn't allowed a sack since 2020. That's 3 years. That's a long time ago. 2020 was, if you'll recall, a different world at this point in terms of how football was being played back then and how the world itself was. But 1,312 pass blocking snaps over the last 3 years. Hasn't allowed a sack and only allowed 30 pressures. In 38 games over that span, 22 of them he didn't allow a single pressure. That means that going into a random game, chances are Lane Johnson is not going to give up one single pressure all game long. That is truly insane to think about just how consistent he has been. Like I said, 30 pressures on 1,312 pass blocking snaps. Evan Neal's given up 29 this season alone. Jack Driscoll, replacing him in that game, gave up 8. He was Jack Driscoll is not it. At this point, they are looking forward to their schedule, saying, how do we get around this issue? Because complete night and day difference. I love Jack Driscoll, love him coming out of Auburn. He is not a high-end pass protecting tackle. He's a serviceable backup swing tackle to have. Not a guy you're happy about being a starting caliber tackle in the NFL. So it's going to change completely what they have to do offensively. Like I said, they a lot of what they did, a lot of how they were able to get so much space for guys like A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, is that when you always have 5 out in a route, you can really spread and take attention away from guys in the defense. When you have to chip, when you have to keep guys in to block longer because you're worried about Jack Driscoll getting his ass handed to him on any given play, all of a sudden that just makes the windows tighter for your 2 dynamic wide receivers on the outside. And you just can't feature them as much, right? Like your defenses, opposing defenses can double and do other things, put safeties over the top that they wouldn't be able to do when there's 5 different options on any given passing play. So you saw it in that game. You saw it the whole second half. Jalen Hurts found out kind of how the other half lived. And now this is going up against what I think is conservatively at worst a top 5 defensive line in the NFL. I'd probably put them top 3. I think it's Philadelphia. I think it's Cleveland. And I think it's New York Jets in terms of the best defensive lines in the NFL. Obviously, 49ers have a case. The Dallas Cowboys have a case. There's some damn good D-lines across the NFL kicking butt. And we'll get to those here in a second. But that Jets front, what Bryce Huff did to some of the backups there was outstanding. Jermaine Johnson had himself a game as well. Jalen Hurts under pressure 43.1% of the time, his highest this season. His 22 pressure dropbacks were the most in a game since 2021 for Jalen Hurts, second most of his career. And that's just like, that doesn't happen if Lane Johnson's healthy in that game. It flat out does not happen. It's a completely different game with him in the lineup. And so now this Eagles team, obviously, they're still damn good. Don't get me wrong. But now you got the Dolphins this Sunday going against them, where I know that the Eagles have a damn good defense, and that's still why they're, going to be there when it's all said and done in the NFC. But I don't care how good your defense is. You're going to have to put up 30 to beat this Dolphins team on any given week. And it's just going to be difficult without Lane Johnson. I'm very curious to see how they fare. We obviously had that stretch that we saw them without Lane Johnson towards the end of last season where they looked different without him on the football field. And obviously comes back for the playoffs. And you look back to your normal selves. But I am worried what it's going to look like. Dolphins this week, and then the Commanders, obviously, with their defensive line, having to try to block Montez Sweat with Jack Driscoll. I don't see that going well for the Philadelphia Eagles. And then you have the Dallas Cowboys after that. So if he's out the next 3 weeks, and if he's out even longer than that through the bye to the Chiefs coming back from the bye right before Thanksgiving, you got a little stretch here where they could drop 3 of these games if they're out, if Lane Johnson's out 5 or 6 weeks, not ready for that Chiefs game, and then the Bills game the next week. Like they have a dog fight of a schedule coming up. This is not the 2022 Philadelphia Eagles schedule that we saw where it was kind of cakewalk after cakewalk. They have a real deal stretch in front of them to where, yeah, they'll probably be favored in a good amount of these games, but it's not like it's not like any of these games are layups, especially when, you just lose to a team like the New York Jets this past week. So Lane Johnson, unfortunate, but man, this Eagles team, I think we're really going to see what they're made of these next few weeks, and hopefully they can survive this stretch, because the Cowboys are still, as much as the Cowboys have kind of looked iffy lately, they're still right there knocking on the door. It still is anyone's division in the NFC East right now. All right, my number 2 takeaway, and this one just goes to coaching across the NFL, and especially on the offensive side right now. I think the difference between the haves in terms of offensive play callers, offensive designers, and basically just saying offense coordinators, and the have-nots is as big as I've seen in recent memory in the NFL. And I'm just going to go through and read right now. So the top 8, you're the top 8 OCs in terms of points per play in the league. Mike McDaniel, Kyle Shanahan, Ken Dorsey. So McDaniel, Dolphins. Kyle Shanahan, obviously, 49ers. Ken Dorsey, Buffalo Bills. Ben Johnson, Detroit Lions. Kellen Moore, Los Angeles Chargers. Shane Waldron, Seattle Seahawks. Matt LaFleur, Green Bay Packers. Sean Payton, Buffalo. Denver Broncos. Andy Reid, Kansas City Chiefs. And I'm not going to go to the flip side and name names. I don't want to call anyone out by I don't want to trash OCs. I feel like you know who I'm talking about. But basically, the teams that aren't utilizing the easy wins that we're seeing, the top offensive play callers around the NFL, notably the usage of motion, notably the usage of play action, notably just more creative design than spamming inside zone 10 times a game, unless, again, you have the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line, unless you have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, but just so many, just a little more creative, just a little attention to detail, a little more than just, hey, we're going to go out there and execute better than anyone else. That doesn't exist in the NFL right now. The teams that are going out and putting up 30 plus week in and week out aren't relying on execution. They aren't relying on 8 guys in unison all doing their job perfectly. You're having to put guys in a position where you can execute a little haphazardly. You can execute just a smidge below perfection and still get the job done. So if you're not trying the way some of these guys are trying, if you're not getting creative, if you're not doing different things, and again, what I alluded to earlier, I just think the gap is so big that And again, you see it. I don't have to name the names of some of these teams. We saw 2 of them play in one of the ugliest games I saw all season this past weekend. But if you're not doing those things, you just are behind in the NFL today. And I don't think you have too much of a chance. Like you're winning with your defense if you're not on the level that some of these guys are, or even attempting to be on the level that some of these guys are. That's all I'll say. Short takeaway, but just every week when I flip on the tape, I'm just like, some teams get it, some teams don't. And I can't imagine how frustrating it is to be one of those teams, to be a fan of one of those teams who just does it. And it just feels like beating your head against a wall. And again, I'm not going to call out too many people by names because you know who it is. You guys just know who it is. All right, before we get to the number one, and it's a fun number one, today's podcast is also brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. I know myself. I was looking for a job semi-recently after having left PFF, and I knew that there was not a lot of, it was a frustrating time. It's hard to not only find jobs, but find good people and qualified people. So going on LinkedIn, updating my LinkedIn was horrible. Yeah. This podcast is also brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. I know personally, myself, I was looking for a job semi-recently. I went to LinkedIn, not how I actually got this job, but I know that I got a bunch of different people reaching out to me from that via LinkedIn Jobs. It's very easy to create a post on LinkedIn Jobs, add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's get to number one. My biggest takeaway from watching the All-22 over the weekend, and it is that the Cleveland Browns are a sleeping giant. Maybe not sleeping anymore, considering they beat what many consider to be the best team in the NFL, San Francisco 49ers, with a backup quarterback in PJ Walker. But this defense, flipping on the All-22 and watching them, just let's start with their game plan first and foremost. They went into this game and said, we have the better players. And now it helped that Deebo Samuel obviously goes down early in this one, didn't play most of the game. But what do I mean when I say we had the better players? I mean, they went up and said, we're going to rush 4, and we are going to play man coverage on the back end. They went up against the San Francisco 49ers, Brandon Ayuk. And again, maybe some of that was driven by the fact that you lose Deebo Samuel early in that game. But still, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Juwan Jennings, no slouch. They went up and played man coverage well over 50% of the snaps, most of the drop back passes. They just said, we could do this. We have the horses. And now they didn't quite. They missed some. There were some missed throws there, or some missed big opportunities. One to Brandon Ayuk, one to Christian McCaffrey. That if they hit those, would have been a different game. But that's kind of like the rub with man coverage when you're going to play that style, right? You're going to say, when you're playing just man across the board, you're saying, we'll give you some. There are going to be times where our guy just loses. Our guy gets cooked. Our guy gets burnt. But we're going to trust that you're going to miss those more often than we're going to make you go to your second, third, fourth read, whatever it is, because we're going to be blanketing you guys across the board. And that's what they did. The most impressive one to me, the guy who really, I think, has fueled this defensive turnaround. Obviously, Jim Schwartz, new DC. It's a very new look in terms of what they're trying to do, especially with their defensive line where they're creating chaos, but more so on the secondary, the talent and what they're doing. One, MJ Emerson is a stud on the outside. This guy is the real deal at outside corner. Last year's 3rd round pick. He immediately usurped Greg Newsome for the outside corner job. And it's because he's one of the best pure press corners in the league right now. The guy at the line of scrimmage is just physicality. He disrupts route timing as consistently as, about any corner in the NFL, like this side of Sauce Gardner, right? Like he's just a damn good press corner. And so having him on the outside, but then Newsome's great in the slot. Obviously, Denzel Ward's one of the best corners in the NFL as well. They go 3 across guys that can play man coverage, have some versatility to them, but that could do that. But then the guy that really was the difference maker in this game, the guy who my eyes just kept going to, because when they play man across the board, he was giving up no separation. Grant Delpit, the safety, former second-round pick out of LSU. He looks like a completely different player this year than he has at any point in his career. They had him, when they go man across the board, he was on Kittle. He was in Kittle's grill. 1 yard Kittle had all game long. And it's because Grant Delpit was in his hip pocket. I mean, it was as good a job as I've seen a safety do on George Kittle on tape. And that was kind of who he was at LSU, right? He was a guy who, in space, you worried about him as a tackler. His zone instincts, iffy, but he could come down and play man coverage on tight ends, on slot wide receivers. And he's a big dude, 6'2", over 200 pounds, perfectly suited to take away some of these good tight ends. He got flagged for one. I believe it was a PI. My opinion, probably a little bit of a bad call. He was in great coverage on George Kittle on that play, but that was it. That was all he gave up in this game. I think what they have there in those 3 corners, and then Delpit, what he can do coming down and matching up with tight ends, it's a defense that's built to it's a defense that's built to dominate, truthfully. And then you go to the front 4. You go to the additions of Zadarius Smith. Dalvin Tomlinson has just added another layer to this defensive line that they didn't have. And the fact that they're moving Myles Garrett around more than ever before, making it harder for defense to account for him. And if you haven't watched Myles Garrett intently, he is the most impactful pass rusher. He's Aaron Donald levels of impact as a pass rusher. If he's one-on-one, he wins. If he's one-on-one, he wins. You just cannot afford, if you're an offensive line, offensive coordinator, you just can't afford to leave him one-on-one consistently and think you're going to block him. He's on another level as a pure pass rusher than anyone else in the NFL right now. Now, there are better, maybe all-around defensive ends. There are guys who are, maybe more productive from a sack perspective, but it's because no one's even giving him that chance. No one lets Myles Garrett go one-on-one anymore, because everyone knows that he is just rushing the passer. The explosiveness is just truly off the charts with them. And going through some of these numbers with this Browns defense, they are now allowing 1 point per drive. That is, if that holds up for the entire season, that's going to be the best figure in 20 years. It's better than the 2009 Jets defense. The Revis Island defense was 1.03. 2013 Seahawks defense was 1.17. This is truly a all-time start for this Cleveland Browns defense. And I don't think there's any slowing down. When you do what they just did to the San Francisco 49ers, who obviously, put up 42 against the Cowboys defense, it's just a week ago. It's hard to ignore exactly how dominant this team can be. Pressured Brock Purdy on 45.1% of his dropbacks in this game. They really are. And I haven't even mentioned like the linebackers. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is a guy who can cover a ton of ground at the second level of this defense. He had a big pass breakup, a big sack in this game. He's a guy that's versatile in what he can do, obviously a little bit undersized, but now they have the defensive line that can actually protect those undersized linebackers and give them some free runs at ball carriers, to where there's just nowhere to attack. You're thinking about, how do I go into the Cleveland Browns and game plan to beat them? And you're struggling for answers. There's not one area where you're like, this is where they're weak, let's go there. It's not the case. There's no area where they're weak, and especially when they just want to play man coverage, because there's not a lot you can do to scheme up. You can do man beaters, you can call rub routes, call pick routes, those sort of things. But man coverage at the end of the day is, our guys are better than your guys. And the Cleveland Browns on Sunday against the San Francisco 49ers, their guys were better. Their guys were flat out better. This is a team that, if Deshaun Watson can, play football again. If you're a Browns fan, you paid all that much, you might at least hope the guy wants to play football for you, even, whatever the hell's going on there with him getting cleared by doctors, but still being out the past 2 weeks. But two, look like any Deshaun Watson we saw prior to, in his days with the Houston Texans, that this is a team that can win a Super Bowl. I mean, it can win a Super Bowl like the Denver Broncos won a Super Bowl, just on simply the backs of that dominant kind of defense. And that's how the Broncos did. Wade Phillips that year, DC, they went out and played man coverage and knew that with Aqib Talib, with Chris Harris Jr., you weren't going to beat those guys on the outside. So, and with obviously the pass rushing up front and Von Miller, they were going to get home before you guys were going to get open. So very interesting to see. The whole AFC North is going to be a dogfight in terms of the defenses in that division. Whew. Very excited to watch that. All right, there you have it. That was the top 5, all 22 takeaways from the week that was week 6 of the NFL season. On this week of Renner Ranks, I'm going to be doing offensive and defensive rookie of the year rankings tomorrow. We're going to have Austin Gale to rank whatever he wants to rank, truthfully. I'm going to kick it to him. At some point, I'm going to get something started to let you guys have input on what we want to rank on each week's show on some of those. But for now, we're going to ask Austin Gale what he wants to rank. And he's going to come on and rank it. I believe it's going to be Thursday's episode. We're going to have Steve Palazzolo coming on later this week, Friday, to rank this quarterback class, 2024 quarterback class. Very excited to hear his rankings. But every Monday is going to be the all 22 takeaways. Hopefully we'll get it up earlier than I did today, because coming back from the Notre Dame game, I was I celebrated. I was at Notre Dame USC this past weekend. If you're a USC fan and saw me, I apologize. I was not on my best behavior after the game. I actually was walking around telling to my buddy every time I'd see a USC fan after the game, I'd say, "Oh my gosh, Bruce Feldman just reported that Lincoln Riley retired." Probably not my finest moment. I feel a little bad if I trolled you doing that, but hey, you only get, I've lived through a lot of Notre Dame USC losses, going to one where they absolutely beat them down. I have no regrets. About it, but I do apologize. So we will be back tomorrow. Like I said, O-Roy, D-Roy, thank you for listening to Renner Ranks, part of the Lockdown Network, your team every day.